Okay, so finding the middle ground. Very often we're kind of, people look at this or that. So the lesson to be learned, two positions may define a dimension, but they don't define what's possible. But you hear this a lot, that people will talk about one thing or the other. And you've got to look for an alternative anytime. I don't know this is an absolute rule, but I think it's pretty close. That you hear people saying this or that, they're missing something. There's something in the middle, or there's something even on another dimension. And the best way to describe this is actually a funny anecdote. Although maybe it is an antidote for binary thinking. So Don Reinertson, we used to hang out a lot together. I've actually never worked with him as an associate, but we like each other. We used to hang out a lot more together than we just, unfortunately, I'm not in the same city with him anymore. But we were at a conference and we'd been going to conferences together. And maybe this wasn't a good thing, but we would sit in the back and kind of kibitz what was going on in the front of the room. And like if any of you remember Mystery Science 3000 or whatever that was, we were kind of like those robots in the back. And we're watching these people debating, and people are talking Scrum versus Kanban or different approaches to complexity. I've got a better method to complexity than you've got. And if someone said A, you could bet somebody else was going to say not A. I mean, this had been going on, like this was now the second day of this. And Don leans over to me and whispers, these folks have been around zeros and ones too long. And I just laughed because I'd been thinking of the same thing. It's not this or that. There's almost always a third option. So when you hear this or that, or when you get yourself caught in this or that, not that I've ever done that, but I've watched. When you get yourself caught in this or that, when you see other people doing this, what you need to do is not try to figure out which is right, but what's the third way? By the way, even if the third way is worse than both of those other ways, it's good to notice there's a third way. Because the moment you notice there's a third way, then you could start looking for a better third way. This is true, by the way, for decision making as well, not just trying to see how this goes. In other words, if you're trying to make a decision, should I do this or should I do that? Anytime, and I think this is true, anytime you're in, should I do this or should I do that? Don't do either one of them. Stop until you come up with a third option. And that third option may be better, may be worse, but either way, it shows you there's more variation, more variables, and it gives you a way to figure things out. Now, maybe the third way will be a confluence of both and it'll resolve things. I'm not saying it'll do that. It might, it may not. One way may be worse than the other way, but having a third option gives you more ability to see what's really happening. And it's important to be able to do that. So, basically, they get attached to their position. They only see it and the opposite. In fact, it's interesting on LinkedIn. I see this all the time. I'll say something that is, and people say, oh, well, then this, like they'll just take the opposite of what I said. I didn't say that. There's, it's like, you'll see people do that to you as well. So you got to be clear if somebody says something and you say, well, that's not true. That doesn't mean you're saying the opposite of what they said is true. That's not true. So this is part of the critical thinking. There's always something in between or possibly on a different line, but different. So it's important to see that.